We're now going on to Amparo Domingo. She is the country contact for Spain for WDI, and the title of Amparo's talk is "What is SOGI, or SOGI, and who is the new Council of Europe Commissioner?" And you can expand the title of your talk better than that. Okay, over to you, Amparo.
I'm going to explain to you, Sharon was saying now that at the UN, member states are pushing for the gender ideology. There are some key figures that are being sort of the channels or the instruments to do that. And I'm going to tell you about this figure called UN Independent Expert on Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity, which is the acronym that Joe was referring, SOGI, which appears in many, many places. As you see, usually this figure is being referred as IE SOGI, and that is the shortest version of this title of this role at the UN. So when you get into the website of the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights at the UN, you see the title, as I said, is Independent Expert on Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity, and you see the logo here at the lower end says that it's a special procedures, and they mention special rapporteurs, independent experts, and working groups. So as an introduction, I would like to show you what's exactly, oh, sorry, this is, what's that exactly? So human rights special procedures are independent people, are members, experts that are being called, and they are called either special rapporteurs, as Alsalem, who Sharon was mentioning in her talk before, but also independent experts. And I'm told that there's a sort of hierarchy that inside the UN, the special rapporteur has like a higher status than the independent experts. Also, they can work collectively, and then they would be called working groups, which are the three names that were in the logo that we saw just at the previous slide. So these people are being called to work on a certain specific topic due to their expertise, to their knowledge, what they have done before to reach a certain level of experience in order to be considered experts. And this is as you know, I usually take snapshots from my sources of information, because sometimes you might think that I'm making things up. These experts, of course, because they are doing a very specialized work and a very sensitive, very delicate work for the UN, they have to be independent, they have to be impartial, honest, and have to have good faith. And in order to preserve that independence, they do not receive any financial remuneration from the UN. So that is supposed to work in favor of that independence, in their opinion, because they do not take money from the UN or any party related to the UN. And they can be appointed for a maximum of 6 years. There's this document that I found at the UN. I'm not an expert. I think this is this is a very simple research looking on the internet, what's happening. And I hope this is quite informative for the women that are new to this subject. So there's this code of conduct that it's public, because UN also wants to have transparency and be relatable. It is published, the code of conduct, and it says that prior to assuming their functions, they have to, in writing, declare solemnly, it is a solemn declaration, that they will perform the duties from a completely impartial, loyal, and conscientious standpoint. And also that their main goal is to protect human rights, and they cannot accept instructions from any other party whatsoever. And this is something that everyone must have signed before getting officially appointed as independent expert or special rapporteur, as this is the case that I'm explaining to you. So this mandate was created in 2016. It's quite recent in the environment or the milieu of the UN. We just heard from Sharon that the special rapporteur on violence against women, it's now 30 years old. Well, this is this independent expert, this role, this mandate was created in 2016. It was for an initial period of 3 years, but it has been renewed and renewed. So now it's on the third renewal from July 22 under the resolution 5010. So this is a snapshot of the document, the resolution adopted by the Human Rights Council on the June 30th, 2016. And the official title of this mandate is Independent Expert on the Protection Against the Violence and Discrimination Based on Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity. So I'm going to explain briefly this is the current mandate holder. We haven't had the opportunity to hear from him in this role. The things that we have found are related to previous engagement, previous responsibilities he had. For instance, he wrote a book, How to Be a Real Gay. He's from South Africa, and he's the expert since November 1st, 2023. When the previous one finished his appointment. So this is a South African man, gay, that also had a master's degree in anthropology and a PhD from the University of Amsterdam. But also now he's a research scholar and a lecturer at the Yale Jackson School of Global Affairs. This is the first expert who was appointed at that initial resolution I just showed you, June 30th, 2016. And this is a Thai man, but who was educated in the United Kingdom. He had his degree in law from Oxford. And this man, the first independent expert the UN appointed, was the co-chairperson of the drafting committee of the Yogyakarta Principles, which are, the responsible for the expansion of the idea that there is that thing called gender identity that no one seems to know what refers to. He was appointed for a period of 3 years, but didn't finish. I don't know the circumstances, but he resigned in the middle of that period. And then Víctor Madrigal Borloz, who we know his actions, of whom we know his actions at this mandate, he was appointed when the previous mandate holder resigned. At his bio, that is public at the UN, there's no mention of his involvement with Yogyakarta Plus principles in 2017, because he was a signatory of that Yogyakarta Plus 10. And this is a snapshot of his position as the signatory list in Yogyakarta Plus. This is a public knowledge. This is a fact that is in the public knowledge. Is not a secret. He tweeted very proudly from his personal account that the Yogyakarta Plus were published, were out, and he was a part of that. So this is a very public knowledge. But Víctor Madrigal Borloz didn't mention that at his official bio that is published, still published today. If you follow this link at the Office of the High Commissioner of the Human Rights at the UN. Madrigal Borloz, who has been 6 years the independent expert, thanks to the research of Tish. I have the picture of her Twitter account, so everyone will recognize her. She published at her website, Gender Critical Woman, that she had located 2 different grants granted, sorry for the for that repetition, by the first Arcos Foundation and then the Human Rights Program at Harvard Law School. They said it's to support the independent experts. Maybe this is because, as we saw before, he was not being paid by the UN while doing that job. So the Arcos Foundation granted him $100,000 for 18 months. And then the Human Rights Program at the Harvard Law School granted him $200,000 for a period of 3 years. The LGB Alliance filed a complaint, a formal complaint sent to the President of the Human Rights Council, and it was sent a copy to the UN Secretary General and the UN Deputy Secretary General and many other high officials that are related to this this position in the UN system. I have here the beginning of this complaint for you to read. This is public also. It is published at the LGB Alliance's website. And they said that he had been in breach of his obligations as independent expert on sexual orientation and gender identity. And they developed this complaint in the following pages. It's very interesting. It's very detailed. And WGGI, they did LGB Alliance. You all will remember that they opened that complaint for signatures, and WGGI signed that, and also from Spain, Confluencia Movimiento Feminista supported this because he has not taken into consideration the rights of gays and lesbians, homosexual, same-sex attracted people, but of course he has also dismissed the rights of women. The summary, extreme summary of this complaint by the LGB Alliance is also publicized at the website, and I have highlighted here the synthesis of that. LGB Alliance stated in their complaint that Mr. Marial Borloz urges countries to introduce gender self-ID and champions the activist manifesto known as the Yogyakarta Principles instead of doing his job, and he largely ignores the sexual orientation part of his mandate. He repeatedly insists the gender self-ID poses no risk to the rights of LGBT people or women, despite being supplied with a mountain of evidence to the contrary. And by doing that, he represents the law, falsely asserting that international human rights law requires the introduction of gender self-ID, which is probably, I think, every report, everything that I have read, published or produced by this independent expert, as a sort of conclusion, like it was the natural conclusion after researching and reading and studying a ton of evidences. It's like he reaches that same conclusion over and over and over in every report. He gets to the conclusion that the best policy is always self-ID, which he then tries to push or to misrepresent that as a UN policy or the outcome of the application of instruments of international instruments of international law. The reports and statements that I'm going to very, very briefly tell you about, issued by this office, this mandate, this role by the UN. The first report that is publicized also at the Office of the High Commission of Human Rights website was called Report on Gender Identity. That was 2018. So this must be a publication, something that Madrigal Borloz issued. I haven't found any report issued by the Thai professor, Birgit Muntab-Born. There might be, as I said, I'm not an expert, but I haven't found it. And as you see, sexual orientation, which is the first item in the binomial sexual orientation and gender identity, really is missing, and it's nowhere to be seen in this report. This is the first page. I have screenshotted for you the first page, which is really, I don't know how to describe whether it is confusion, whether it is manipulation of language, because it's impossible to make sense of this. The first assertion is that all persons have some form of gender identity. And please have in mind, this is a document that is publicized, it is public, it's published at the Office of the High Commission of Human Rights of the UN. So this is written in a personal capacity by the independent expert, but it's for everyone to read at the official website of the Office of the High Commission of the Human Rights, as you can see here by the domain. So according to this, it would seem that the UN thinks that we all have some form of gender identity. This is a sort of the new religion, as you know. We all have a soul, and that soul will tell you whether you are male or female, depending on whatever you like to do or how to dress. This is not an exaggeration, what I said about how to dress, because, well, they use this expression, the sex assigned at birth, but this individual experience of gender, which is called the gender identity, includes gender expressions like dress, which is fashion, speech, which is thought in your culture, and mannerisms. So that is supposed to be part of your innate gender identity. He goes on saying that the notion that there is a gender norm, it's based on a preconception, but then instead of preconception, goes on to saying that it is a misconception. So in 2 lines, he has changed the meaning of the word, and as misconception, he states that as human nature is to be classified with reference to male-female binary system on the basis of the sex assigned at birth. And this is a misconception, according to the expert. He says that the misconception is that there's a legitimate societal objective that, as a result, persons adopt the roles, feelings, expressions, and behaviors that are considered inherently masculine and feminism. Well, we feminists do not characterize this as a misconception. We characterize this as sexism, which we oppose, but we don't defend this. So he's mixing objections and statements that really come from very different positions, ideological positions. And here he says that the term trans is used to refer to persons who identify with a different gender than the one they were assigned at birth. In the previous paragraphs, he said that what was assigned at birth was sex, not gender. Gender was an innate feeling, not something they assigned to you. So really it's very, very, very confusing. And he also says that all over the world, there were cultures that recognize genders other than male and female. We don't know exactly what he's referring. Well, he's referring to that hijra and all that, travesti, but that's not a gender or a sex. That's male behaving as what society thinks is more suitable for women. This is a slide that comes from the summary of another report. The previous report was called Gender Identity. This report is called Gender Theory. As you have seen, LGB Alliance is right. He has practically never spoken about sexual orientation. And in the report, this is a summary. This slide I have used before, but I'm still shocked several years after having read it for the first time, because there's this sentence that he understands gender as a supra-biological phenomenon with social implications, which we don't know what it means, but this should not really imply that men should be regarded as women before the law, or that anyone has a right to go to the registry and then change their legal sex or the legal ID or their passport or the driver license. We don't know exactly the meaning, but he's using this very obscure language to do something that is very easy to explain. That is, he wants men to be considered women legally. And this is the kind of language that he's using to make appear or make believe people that this is a very complex phenomenon, and this is very complicated, and it is not easily understandable or easily to explain. This is the last consultation that was open. This was the first consultation of the current mandate holder. We haven't seen the result. I guess it will be published in June. I think that's when the 56th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council will take place. And then he will present the report out of the submissions he got when this call was open. It was about protection against violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity in relation to the human rights to freedom of expression, association, and assembly. And I will be very curious to know whether he has included what we also heard at the previous experts, previous panelists we had here, when it was mentioned that lesbians were not allowed to have a single-sex space without men. I would think that this is something related to their sexual orientation and their right, human right to freedom of association and assembly. Let's see whether that appears in the report that this expert is going to issue during the year. This is not a report. This is just a sort of an open question. There's a side of the website that is called Issues in Focus, and there are different links to different topics. And as with the reports, I haven't seen anything related to same-sex attraction or homosexuality, or how you would like to call it, but it's always gender. And maybe there are here the lesbians and gays when he mentions LGBTI or LGBT, but it's not really an issue that is separated from gender identity. There's always the mix, The binomial is usually the way to confuse people about this thing. Anyway, because of the new term for me, gender diverse person, which I wasn't sure I had come across before, I had a look. So when clicking on the struggle of trans and gender diverse persons, you find this definition. This gender identity definition is exactly as Yogyakarta, and indeed this footnote, when you hit the footnote, you go to the Yogyakarta principles. So currently, the Office of the Independent Expert Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity, they do quote Yogyakarta principles as if it were official from the UN. We know it is not. This is a snapshot is from today or yesterday. So this is really the current situation. And aside from gender identity, he explains that gender diverse, it's used to refer to persons whose gender identity, including the gender expression, is at odds with what is perceived as being the gender norm in a particular context at a particular point in time, which to me is fashion or culture, but it's not a gender identity it's not being diverse. It's not. I don't understand how he could refer to this social mandate as being a part of the innate identity of the people. Also, he includes those who do not place themselves in the male/female binary. Prior, we have seen that they refer to the binary as masculine and feminine. That could be argued because it is made by society. There could be other ways of expressing oneself, but really, as sexes, there is nothing else outside the male-female binary because there's no third sex. So also, this doesn't make any sense. And then
Amparo, I'm just going to jump in and say, could you wind up in the next few minutes?
Yeah, it's I think it's my last slide. Or really, I'm finishing. Thank you. Sorry. So trans is used to describe persons who identify with a different sex than the one assigned to them at birth. As we saw in the previous report, it was the gender that was assigned to them. So because of this definition of the gender norm in a particular context at a particular point in time, and because I was a child in the 70s and a teenager in the 80s, this is what came to mind, really. So these men who were men and never claimed to be other than men, really expanded the gender norms or challenged the gender norms or changed the gender norms, whatever you want to call them, but they were just men. Some were gay, some were straight. And this is, as I said before, this is a part of fashion and some avant-garde in fashion, but not in any kind of inner innate identity. And in terms of gender norms, if this is the male norm, the tie and the suit, and these gods also wear suits and some wear ties, but also wear makeup. And here we have the punks that are completely different, are dressed completely differently from what other men are, but very similar to what women are also dressing, very, very similar. Are they non-binary? Should punks be added as the P to the ever-expanding acronym as identity? This is, I don't know, an idea. And as an appendix, just what Joe mentioned at the beginning, this is the rapporteur of the Yogyakarta Principles. He was the one who drafted the initial text that the other experts at that meeting in Indonesia were working on and then published. This man has now just been appointed Commissioner for Human Rights at the Council of Europe. So the current commissioner is still in office. She will end very soon, and when that happens, he will step in and be for the following years the Commissioner for Human Rights at the Council of Europe, which affects around 50 countries. So as a summary of my presentation is that sometimes we see information, sometimes we see documents, statements, reports that appear to be the official position of a multilateral organism, of a multinational organism like UN, EU, Council of Europe, but maybe behind that report is the work of trans activists, as this man that I was showing you today. And that's why also there's a lot of confusion about what's official or not official, or what's something that states are compelled to follow, or maybe it's just a recommendation. So this information, I think, is useful for our activism, and that's all that I have today.